Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're ready to start. If you could take your seats, please. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by welcoming all of you as members and also those members of the public and press who have joined us today, either in person or watching via the live stream to this meeting of the Communities, Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee at New Shire Hall in Alconbury Weald. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures, tweet or blog during the meeting. But could I please request that members of the committee and the public turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm does sound, please leave by the nearest marked fire exits and assemble in the car park. So item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Batchelor and Councillor Dupre is subbing for him, and Councillor Billington and Councillor Gardner is subbing for him, and Councillor Prentice has sent apologies.
Thank you, Nick. And do we have any declarations of interest? Ian Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a non-statutory disposal interest for agenda item number 5, as I'm the member for Alconbury and Kimbolton.
Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you. I'm not the local member for any of the items under discussion today, but I feel I should declare that I have been approached by objectors to the Streatham scheme and that I have given them procedural advice about how they can make their views known, and I have facilitated them to make their views to officers. But I am approaching everything with an open mind today, and I don't feel that that has in any way prejudiced my ability to act impartially and vote accordingly.
Thank you very much, Lorna. Dan.
Thank you. I am the local member for Streatham, and I also attended a public meeting and several meetings subsequently about the very issue that we're considering today. So I feel in a similar spirit to Councillor Dupre, I should declare that.
Thank you. Both of those are noted. Anybody else before we move on? Jan?
Yes, I'm a member of Fenland, but I'm not a member of Wisbech Park, just to clarify that.
Right, thank you. So item 2 is the minutes of our meeting held on the 21st of July. We're being asked to approve minutes of our last committee meeting. Can I ask if any member disagrees with the accuracy of these minutes at all? So, thank you. So I see no objections, so I'll sign those as approved. Item 3, petitions and public questions. Can I ask the Democratic Services Officer to inform the committee of any questions from members of the public?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there are 3 public questions that have been received in relation to agenda item 5, Communities Capital Fund, and they'll be taken when the committee reaches that item on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Nick. Item 4 is the Household Support Fund update, and that'll be presented by the Deputy Director for Communities, Employment and Skills, Paul Fox. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This report takes 2 parts, one relating to the current tranche of Household Support Fund, which runs until the end of this month, the 30th of September, and a very brief update on the indication that there will be, as we now know, a new Household Support Fund running from the 1st of October to the end of this financial year. Members are reminded that the second tranche of Household Support Fund ran from 1st of April 2022 and finishes on the 30th of this month. We were allocated £3.581 million to support those in need. There were significant restrictions on how that money might be spent. At least 1/3 had to be spent on children and families, and 1/3 on pensioners. And it was the latter, as we've previously reported to this committee, that proved the most problematic. And despite extensive communication campaigns, take-up from that group was very, very slow. More recently, we have had a significant uptick in applications. That was based on our related ability to access and utilise Department of Work and Pensions lists, personally identifiable information of those who are in receipt of pension credit. And we took the option to direct mail all of those individuals and invite them to apply for the Household Support Fund through our partners with Age UK, Cambridge and Peterborough. In a very positive way, and that has meant a very large increase in applications, and there is now a waiting list, and people who have applied by the 30th of September will receive support. However, because it took such a while to get to that uptick, we are faced with an underspend in that area. So we were looking at contingency plans. Members will recall this isn't money given to us, it's money that we spend and then reclaim from the government. And if we don't spend the maximum allocation, we can't spend it, we can't carry it over. That spend has to be made by the end of September. So we talked a lot about how we might utilise a contingency to make sure that money was available to the residents of Cambridgeshire, and that's all set out in section 2 of the report. But broadly, and to summarise, we have discussed with Anglian Water how we might best use their offices to support those in need. The contingency that we've settled on is to identify pensioners, so they meet the criteria for this element of the Household Support Fund, who are in arrears with their water bills. And we will utilise, the proposal is that we utilise unallocated resource from the pensioner tranche to give to Anglian Water, who will then identify those pensioners who are in arrears and give them a payment holiday. So this isn't clearing arrears, this is giving payment holiday to those in arrears so that money retains in their pockets over the forthcoming months. The actual amount of that is very difficult for us to estimate even at this late stage, because in part it depends on the amount of payments we make to those in the Age UK waiting list, to give it a better terms. So the report gives a broad indication of the amount, which we believe will be £800,000. When we are very clear about that later next week of the exact amount, we will work. We've got a number of scenarios with Anglian about how long the payments last for, the payment holidays, what level of debt is the trigger for to be part of that to that proposal. So the recommendations are to spend the available balance of funds of the pensioner element of the second tranche of HSF with Anglian Water to support customers of pensionable age who are in arrears. The report also talks about Cambridge Water, who have been unable to come to the same arrangement with us. They have been unable to process this kind of information and provide us with the information we would need to go forward. So be very open that there is an inherent inequity in that across the county, but not one we can close. And we don't believe it was a strong enough inequity to not seek to utilise the Anglian Water route. To delegate authority to myself, Interim Director of Communities, Employment and Skills, to make decision regarding the practical distribution of the balance of those funds. That was the reference I made to exactly what amount people would receive. So we're asking for allocation of the overall tranche rather than it will be X number of months or Y number of months, because even at this late stage, we are still nailing that down. I would seek to amend that actually and the next recommendation where it says delegate authority to Interim Director Communities Employment Skills for both B and C. I think it should be amended to in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. And then finally, the third part of the report talks about Household Support Fund 3, as we call it, which is Household Support Fund from 1st of October. We don't have our next committee meeting till the 1st of November, and even though the scheme goes live on the 1st of October, we still await guidance from DWP on what the requirements from that scheme will be. We are told that a lot of the restrictions we currently experience will be loosened, but we haven't seen that in formal guidance. So that final recommendation asks you to delegate authority to myself about how to run that HSF between now and the 1st of November, when we can first come back to committee. We have had an indication just today by email that the indicative allocation will be the same as last year's. There was some indication that there would be rebalancing across the country based on various deprivation indices. Whether they've done that elsewhere or not, I haven't had time to check, but certainly for Cambridgeshire, there's no indicative change in the amount of resource available. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. Any questions? So, Steve?
Not so much a question, Chairman, but a comment, if I may. And as Paul has said, this isn't ideal, but it's the best we've got at the moment. And I'll thank officers for the work they've put in to try and target this funding to those that need it most. But it does beg the question that we perhaps ought to work on a more cohesive methodology for taking advantage of these funding streams that come in. With our learning from the COVID hub, our Think Communities team and our Think Communities approach, we perhaps should give a bit more thought to how we do target those in most need, as we seem to, end up being a little bit desperate trying to find those people and contact them, identify them, and often doing it through partners that we perhaps don't often work that closely with. So with our partnership approach, working with partners, I just wonder if we could come up with a more cohesive methodology so that it makes the process easier in future when we need to target certain sections of the community.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that, Paul?
Well, as you might imagine, I say we do a lot of thinking about how we target those in need. I mentioned earlier, I hope this doesn't come across as defensive, but I did mention earlier we still await the guidance for a scheme that is going to launch in 8 days' time. And that very much put us on the back foot when the government announced that they wanted a third spent on pensioners. No one expected that. And I think most authorities are facing the same dilemma. Some authorities have taken an approach of just mailing out vouchers to anyone they know. We don't believe that's the right approach because we don't believe that draws people in for further engagement and personalised support. But we were wrong-footed on pensioners without any question. It took a long time to catch up. I think the government have actually listened on this one, and our early indications are they're going to release the kind of restrictions they've previously applied to HSF. But in principle, I absolutely agree. We need to think about how we target, which is why we've got our trusted partner groups, which is why we're looking at how we might work with the warm hubs proposed in some districts about putting household support fund and anti-poverty support through those and really getting an integrated approach. Sometimes it's easy to get diverted to thinking about who we might target rather than what we can offer to those who are self-presenting to us already. But it's a combination of both, I think.
Thank you, Paul. Ros, you're next.
So I recognise that it's been really hard, especially with the requirement for pensioners to take a specific chunk of the money. The Cambridge water issue is obviously a bit of a nightmare. I was speaking to a colleague about this, and they asked if we'd contacted the CEO of the parent company, South Staffordshire Water. If that hasn't happened, could that happen in the next 8 days or very soon?
It's a very interesting question. I had the CEO's details on my laptop a few days ago and almost took that route during a period where it was difficult to get any response, frankly, from Cambridge Water. We did eventually get a response, and that response was, we can't do it. I must admit, we've taken that as read. So that does remain an option, I suppose, yeah.
Anybody else at all? Philippa?
Yes, it's on the Cambridge Water thread. I can understand you going ahead. You're not the only one who's found it difficult to get hold of Cambridge Water, but it was also being pointed out that it's now Staffordshire. There may be other routes with other councils that have done it in this water area, that water area. Just a thought that they may well not, they may feel they can ignore one email, but certainly I'm sure we'd all support you on trying again when you get the chance.
In the spirit of both those last two comments, I'm more than happy to give it another try. It's certainly, of course, as you might imagine, we've no desire to deliver an inequitable scheme, but the clock is against us now.
Thank you. So we have three recommendations, A, B, and C. Slight amendment to one of them, to two of them, B and C, where we delegate authority to the interim director plus chair and vice chair of this committee. So there seems to be a consensus on that. Anybody have any objections? We will, no? Okay, that's great. They're approved. And now we'll move swiftly on to I think what will be the main item, which is the recommendation of the steering group on the future of incomplete projects for the Communities Capital Fund. That's item 5. This will also be presented by Paul and includes recommendations of the steering group on the future of incomplete projects. I believe we have Adam Garford here as well, who's the interim area manager for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and the place-based coordinator for East Cambridgeshire, Wendy Lansdowne, and for South Cambridgeshire, and that's Abby Farrell. We've received 3 requests to address the committee today. We have Councillor Douglas de Lacy from Girton Parish Council, Councillor Richard Nuttall from Streatham Parish Council, and a group called Residents Together. They're a group of Streatham Parish residents. So what I will do first is we'll go to the public address first, and then Paul will take us through the rest of the report. So if I can invite Councillor Douglas de Lacy, who's chair of Girton Parish Council, to address the committee. You'll have 3 minutes, and obviously members can ask questions of clarification. We don't want to get into a protracted debate because we'll do that under the main item and the main part of this this agenda item. He's online.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
Mr. Lacy. Yes. I can hear you. There seems to be something wrong with my video. I have tried to start my video, Chair, and nothing seems to be happening. If you don't mind a blank screen, I'm happy to carry on. Hello, can you hear me? I can't hear anything now. I'm sorry, Chair, I can't hear anything. I can't start my video for some reason, Chairman, and I can't hear anything now, though I heard you perfectly earlier. Are you able to hear me?
Right. So do we have Councillor Nuttall at all from Streatham Parish Council? Thank you. Do you want to come to the table there, and if you just press that centre button for the microphone, then we can all hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Richard Nuttall. I'm the chair of the Streatham Community Hub Project Group within the Streatham Parish Council. I believe some of my comments have been circulated to committee already, so I won't read them verbatim, but I'd like to clarify a few points. The project timing was very significantly affected by the COVID lockdown. We have now, though, started very rapid progress. We have submitted our planning application that's gone in July. We understand that that will be determined in the October planning for East Cambs. We've also appointed architect, quantity surveyor and a lead contractor of the project. We're actively working with them on detailed designs. The costs have increased from the original proposal. However, we have modified the scope of the initial phases and we have split the project into multiple phases. So in particular, phase 1, which is the main hall, community cafe and facilities, are approximately within the original budget that the fund that we're talking about today was requested for. In addition, phase 3, we've had news on that will be an additional courtyard, and we've had agreement from the NHS that they are committing. They have had agreement in principle to include a GP surgery and a dispensing pharmacy within the Streatham Community Hub, and using some of the shared resources of the Streatham Community Hub, like the toilet block and the kitchen area. We have had discussions with them about options on it, and they have made it clear that the proposal that we have with them, that they rent the rooms from the space, would only be viable if it's part of the Streatham Community Hub and they don't have a viable alternative. So if the scheme does have to be cancelled, that would affect the GP surgery. And I should say that although we have had some local opposition, one of the main points that was raised by local opposition was that there is no GP surgery included within the Streatham Community Hub. And I think that addresses that one of those large points. There was also comments in the recommendations that we needed to find additional funding, matched funding. So to that end, we have sought a Public Works Loan Board. We can formally apply for that. We've had indication that that will be accepted. We will apply for that formally once planning is granted. We've also applied for SIL funds from the East Cams fund, and also we're about to apply for the East Cams Growth Fund, which would be for phase 3 as well. We've also had agreement in principle on the land, so that those will be transferred to us when planning application is granted. So I'd like to close by saying we request that the committee extend the existing grant agreement with no other amendments other than those relating to the milestones and completion dates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nuttall. Questions of clarification from members? Claire?
Thank you very much for your presentation. Could you perhaps clarify in what ways COVID held up the project?
Well, at the time, we were not meeting in full council, so we had delegated authority for day-to-day council work to a small party of the councillors. It was also very difficult to meet in person with architects and the others on site, and have other meetings that we needed to do. And it just delayed the discussions. I think that's the same.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Lucy and then Lorna.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. The GP surgery and pharmacy, could you tell me who you've heard from that would be likely to be, and I've got another question afterwards, because I know that actually getting general practitioners to actually be able to set up a new surgery is extremely difficult. So it would be it's really important to understand exactly who is giving you that reassurance. And the other point was on the funding. What I think you said that you'd got some indications, and I know we've got some paperwork about it on the Public Works Loans Board, but just for those watching, if you could be clear about what those indications, what level of reassurance you've had on that, because clearly that's very important for whether or not this project is in any way likely to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so we have spoken to Louisa Wood. She's at the Staplow Medical Centre, and has made a expression of interest to the NHS commissioners. So that expression of interest has been agreed in principle. The next stage of the project is for us to work with them to agree the detailed design of the buildings. But the expression of interest covers the rental amount that the NHS would be paying to us on an ongoing basis. So we would be responsible for the capital expenditure of the project and then rent the facility. And that rent would cover a significant proportion of the Public Works loan outgoings. The other one was, question was on funding. So we previously sought from the Public Works Loan Board an indication on funding of £650,000. I should make clear that that would be the maximum we would want to receive. And it will be, we are trying to find other funding sources that would allow us to reduce the amount of drawdown from that fund. So that would be the absolute maximum. We will be making a formal request once planning application is agreed.
Thank you. Lorna, you're next.
Thank you. A few questions from me. The original cost of the whole project was 1.6 million, according to the report. And the report says that that may have increased to over 3 million. Councillor Nuttall, your document to the committee disputes the 3 million, but doesn't say, and it only says costs are higher than originally planned. What is the total cost now? And what is the cost of each of those 3 phases in your document, please?
So to answer that, we don't know where the 3 million amount came from. That did not come from the Streatham Parish Council. The original first phase, or the main phase, which covers the main hall and the community facility, we think will be in the region of £1.6 million, and phase 3 will be around 650,000. Phase 2 is not down to us in terms of costs. So phase 2 is a series of micro retail units which will be paid for and operated by the Streatham and Wilburton Community Land Trust. So the costs of that will be down to them.
So the total cost is somewhere then in the region of 2.25. Can I just confirm?
Yes, that's right.
2.25 million.
And
right.
the community's capital fund contribution would be for phase 1 only for that.
Right. Okay, I'll come on to that in a minute. My second question is the PWLB loan board. You say you've got agreement in principle to that. What does that mean, and what further? How certain is a PWLB loan for this project on the basis of what you have to date? If Mr. Fox asked to see all the documents, what would you be able to give him that would satisfy him that this was a happening thing?
Right, so the full process for the Public Works Loan Board requires various levels of agreement. What our RFO has applied previously to the Public Works Loan Board of the figure that I've mentioned, with details of the project as planned, and asked for confirmation that if we were to submit a request with that amount on the basis of that project for our council, whether that is likely to be approved. And the answer was yes to that.
And that would be repaid through the precept?
It would be repaid through income coming in. So as mentioned, if the NHS GP surgery goes ahead, then the money, some of the rental, or the bulk of the rental from that would go to repaying the loan. And other would come from other funding. And one of the things we will be doing is trying to reduce the capital fund so that that loan amount is reduced.
To clarify on the funding then, if I can seek clarity a little further, when you put in this bid originally, you were looking to raise 1.1 million or provide 1.1 million over and above what you were asking from the council. You were asking the council for 500,000 and the total project was 1.6 million.
That's right. Yes.
And what you're now facing is a total cost for all the phases, excluding the 500,000 that you still want from the council, of 1.75. So your cost would increase by 650,000.
That sounds right.
Right. Okay. Thank you. On the surgery, just for clarity, I see that it's in the third phase of the project, and you said in your opening remarks that one of the reasons for the criticism of the project was that it didn't include a surgery. However, your statement says that you've divided the project into phases to ensure you can still proceed with a viable project, even if the scope is reduced to just phase one. But if you reduce the project to just phase one in order to keep it within the original costs that you started out with, then you indeed do lose the GP surgery, which therefore corroborates the concerns of those who are objecting on that ground, surely.
Yes, I think that's largely true. However, the GP surgery was not the only driver. Clearly, the parish rooms that we currently have are not fit for purpose. And the primary driver for us as a parish council to progress the project is to provide a new community hall and community facilities. The reason for the split into the phase 1 and 3 is that if at a medium stage of the project, if we don't secure all of the funding we would like to receive, then we can still go ahead with phase 1, for example, without doing phase 3 as well. And the agreement with the NHS was only very recently progressed. So that's only happened in the last 2 weeks, where we've had that confirmation that expression of interest has been approved.
Thank you. And final question from me on clarification about how you've identified the level of community support, which you seem to suggest is very much in favour of the project. Given the, I understand there was a public vote recently at a public meeting, which was very strongly opposed to the scheme. I understand that the comments in response to the planning application are significantly weighed against the proposals. And the recent by-election was very much run of Streatham Parish Council on this project, yes or no, and significantly came down in favour of those who are opposed to the project. Do you take any account?
Hello,
of,
testing.
What account have you taken of those straws in the wind in telling us that there is a significant weight in favour of the application locally?
So we did a quite significant consultation event in November and December that we spent 2 days talking to potential users, existing users of the parish rooms and potential users of the new site, and also allaying the fears of people that did not want primarily individuals that didn't want the facility on their doorstep. As far as the public vote goes, that was not a council organised vote, so we don't know. I mean, one of the issues with the objective is that they're very leading questions that have been asked, like, are you prepared to spend lots of money from your precept every month in order to get a new facility, rather than would you like a new facility that replaces the current parish rooms with a GP surgery? So we're aware of the opposition, and it has been quite vocal, but we've also are aware of many people who do want the facility, but have been intimidated and are not prepared to speak up because of the intimidation that they've received from the people that don't want it. So that's been one of the reasons that we've had less people speak up in favour than we would have liked.
Thank you. Lorna, my question is on a similar theme. How are you going to demonstrate public support for this project? How will you show that?
Ongoing, we are very much committed to continue to keep members of the village up to date with the project progress. We take questions at our council meetings, and when we have as the project progresses and we have the detailed designs, then we will present those again to the community and ask for their contributions and involvement.
Okay, when do you anticipate having detailed designs? And my second question is, do you have anything in writing from the NHS? I think you said it was only an expression of interest.
I don't have a formal letter in writing at this point.
Do you know when you'll have a formal design for the project?
We are working on that now. We're hoping to get that done by around the end of October, and that sort of period.
Thank you. I'll go to Ros and then to Dan. Ros.
Can I just go back over the phases and how much each one costs and where the money for each phase is coming from? So the first phase is estimated to be.
So the first phase one is, I don't have the precise figures in front of me, about around 1.6 million. Of that, the Communities Capital Fund is about $500,000. We would raise a Public Works Loan Board loan, and in addition, we would be looking to sell the existing parish rooms. That would be around 150,000. We have some other funds in reserves as well. And those together would cover the, and the SIL funding as well. So the application for the SIL funding we've put in is 550,000. So that would cover phase one. Phase two, as I mentioned, is down to SWCLT. So we are cooperating with them on the planning. I do not have details of the cost of that, but that doesn't relate to this fund. And the phase three would be a separate pot that would be covered by the remainder of the Public Works Loan Board, around 100,000, and the rest would be from the Growth Fund application. So that's our current planning. However, that doesn't mean that we've stopped other options, and that we are also applying for looking at other sources of funding as well. And the intention throughout is to reduce the amount of drawdown required on the Public Works Loan Board, and hence the impact on the precept.
Okay, because without the surgery, presumably you're not, that was the mechanism which was going to pay for the pay to avoid reducing the precept. So if the surgery doesn't get built, then there's just a large Public Works Loan Board being paid by the parish.
And that would be some of it, but if the phase three does not go ahead, then the loan would be less. And there, as I mentioned, there are other sources of funding that we are aware of and will be applying for as soon as planning permission is granted, which would further reduce the drawdown of the loan.
And there's the second question would be, I know in Histon and Impington, there would be a referendum to raise the precept in this manner. Is that the case in Streatham, or is that, I mean, that was a decision made by the parish council? Is that the case in Streatham or not?
We've not made that decision yet. I think the decision would be based on what the size of that impact on the precept is. So if it's considered that it would be a significant increase, then yes, it would be.
Thank you, Ros. Dan and then Jan.
Thank you. Just a few points, really. I was on the front line of an organisation that also received money from Communities Capital Fund, and ran that project through COVID. A project that started off at, maybe $1 million, ended up at closer to 3.5 million, because it was phased in the same way.
Point of order. I thought we were on questions of clarification to Councillor.
We are, so I'm hoping you'll be asking a question at the end of that.
I am, yeah. I'm just providing some context.
Okay.
And so I can, having lived that experience, I can absolutely see how the impact of COVID would have left Streatham Parish Council and the working group in the position that they're in. And I just wanted to ask if you could make it clear to this committee, because I don't think you have, the resource, the human resource that is available to you to pull off this extraordinarily big project for a very small community.
Yes, We have 6 members of the current parish council who form what we call the project group, which I chair. And the role of that group is to progress the project to the stage of building. We have
Hello, Councillor
an
Delacey.
RFO who is previously worked
It's
for
Rhiannon. Would you like to speak
and is
again?
familiar with being an asset holder and with construction and building. We have also appointed, as I think I mentioned, comments, an architect who we're
Unfortunately, I
working
still
with very
can't hear
closely
you.
and provided the bulk of the documents that are, went to planning.
Is that any
We
better?
have
Can you hear me
a
now?
Yes, this is
local
better. You're much
contractor who
louder.
is actually on
Great,
site at the
thank you.
moment building
Am I
other
distorting or
parts
is
of
that
the
about the right level?
construction.
You could be a
And we
little
have a
bit
quantity
louder and it
surveyor
might be a
appointed who,
benefit, but if
Right.
we've
not,
relied on
That's
and
full
continues to
volume.
rely on
Then-
for estimates.
brilliant. I will have the councillors
In addition,
listen close.
the
Thank
vice
you very
chair,
much.
Thank you very much,
Charles
Rhiannon,
Roberts is very
for
familiar with
persevering.
the
I'll switch
Streatham
off my
Warburton
microphone now.
Community Land Trust.
No worries.
Thank
He
you.
has been a strong support during the process as well. I hope that answers.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to clarify something that was said earlier. Councillor Dupre mentioned that there's quite a lot of public opposition to the scheme.
I think probably we'll leave that for the debate,
Okay.
Dan. So this is really for questions of clarification to to Mr. Nuttall. So if you wanted to make that comment during the debate, that's
Fine.
fine.
All right. I'll save it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. This really concerns me. Excuse me. There's a lot of ifs and possibilities, but no hard figures. I don't understand how somebody can come and ask for this money to be secured when we don't actually have hard figures and confirmation, especially about the doctor's surgery. And it does concern me that the majority of the parish village people are actually up in arms over this. I just don't understand this at all.
Thank you, Jan. Anybody else have any comments at all? Claire? These are all questions for clarification, I should say.
It's a question of clarification. You mentioned planning permission. Could you just repeat what you said about planning permission? You haven't obtained it, have you?
So the planning application, so we have done a pre-application previously and had an amount of feedback from the planning officer. So at the time of planning permission, which was submitted in July, I don't remember the exact date, I think it was registered on the 6th of July. The planning application included all of the relevant reports that went with it, such as the traffic, acoustics, ground survey and the various other surveys. The information I have was that it was considered that it will be called into planning committee in October. I don't have an exact date, but my understanding is it will be determined at that point.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Question, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Forgive me, I'm not very familiar with Streatham as a village, but I do note that some of the objectors their concerns are that this is part of a new development and doesn't appear to be part of the original village. So it's not a hub in the centre of the village in the true sense of the word. So I just wondered what plans the parish council has got to make sure this is integrated into the fabric of the village and not just something that's a satellite in a housing development to one side of the village. It needs to have some ownership of the whole village, I'm sure you appreciate.
Yes, we consider that absolutely essential. We did consider 7 original locations for the site. Unfortunately, the current one is the only one that was remaining and viable. Yes, we consider it needs to be fully integrated into the community. There are very good footpaths allowing individuals to walk from the cross in the centre of the village. That's a few minutes away. And the new developments are a sizable number of houses, so it provides services to those. We will be moving council meetings to there and probably eventually selling the parish rooms. So there will be a natural move there. And we think the GP surgery and the micro retail units will also provide that focus of attention. One of the things we considered critical was to have a facility that's sufficient size to be a magnet and a hub for the community, and not just parish rooms on their own, which we could have done separately.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, Mr. Nuttall, greatly appreciated. We'll now go to residents together who are the residents at Streatham. Are they online, Nick? Do we know?
I believe so, Chair. Yeah.
Hello, yes, I'm here. Thank you. Can you hear
Excellent.
me?
Welcome. Thank you. Yes, just please introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I am Katerina Darcy on behalf of Residents Together, which is a group that was formed in Streatham to assist with informing all residents of matters pertaining from the Parish Council in Streatham. So I will read out my brief 3-minute version of a response to Councillor Nuttall's statement. Streatham Parish Council were awarded funding from ECDC Communities Capital Grant in September 2020. Since that time, the Parish Council failed to engage with Streatham residents and continue to fail to engage with or consult the Streatham Parish residents. As noted at point 5 in Streatham Parish Council Stage 2 grant application, the Parish Council have not set up a social club management committee. The Parish Council has made no attempts to engage with the local community to organise fundraising events to help with the financial costs for a new village centre. The project has never been put out to invite for open tender. A non-publicised deal has been made with Lara Homes for the build of the community centre. No figures on the overall cost have ever been made public. No one has seen any long-term thinking about how this new community centre will be managed or financially supported to ensure it is maintained. We're in a period of austerity which provides huge financial angst and uncertainty for many individuals. The lack of transparency is a huge alarm for anyone reviewing the project and the risks it is assuming. Ongoing maintenance of Streatham Village assets, or lack thereof, indicates that the Streatham Parish Council have no comprehensive long-term view about how to maintain assets it currently owns, all of which are in various states of disrepair and dilapidation, let alone a huge resource sink as proposed in the village community centre. Smaller, more sensibly located ideas have been recommended by certain parish councillors to recondition or rebuild the existing recreation ground pavilion building. A far cheaper and more risk-averse plan was provided but never put to the public vote. If the NHS has agreed in principle, it is very welcomed. However, no real meaningful commitment has been made, and the majority of Streatham residents view it with a degree of suspicion. Many residents tend to see this as yet another carrot being dangled to ease people into not objecting to the community centre project as planned. Until a signed legal commitment is made, any promise of a surgery should not be given any weight in the decision-making process at this time. The project, as noted by the steering committee, is a complicated and ambitious plan. It risks lumbering a small village with a huge burden for years to come. Some local opposition is a disingenuous comment from Councillor Nuttall. A recent vote at a publicly convened parish meeting of Streatham residents established who were in favour and who were against the proposed community centre building as planned. Over 100 residents present were against, while only 2 residents present voted in favour. A recent election of a new parish councillor saw the candidate who was standing on an anti-community centre platform
Can I just
sweep
ask
through
you
to
to
win.
conclude your remarks, please? Thank you.
Yeah, it is simply not acceptable to the majority of Streatham residents for the parish council to use a public works board loan of £650,000 to put towards the build cost of this project. They have not or ever been consulted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you can stay where you are, we'll take any questions of clarification. Yeah, Ian.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I just ask, how many residents are there in Streatham? Because you said 100 voted against, but how many residents actually live and vote within Streatham?
I think it's frozen, hasn't it? Oh, can you hear us?
I'm sorry, is that question for me?
Yes, it's a question.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry, I didn't realise. Latest figures that I have Googled were 2,000 residents.
Can I just
Just as a point of clarification,
gonna
Councillor,
clarify,
at the recent Streatham Parish Council by-election, the total Streatham electorate was identified as 1,565.
So, Chair, can I just say then? Can I just say then, 100 residents voting against something at a public meeting is not the majority of the residents within Streatham as you stated.
Okay.
Out of 110 attendees, 100 voted against, two voted for it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Question, Ros?
The representative from the parish council said that there was a 2-day consultation exercise, and you've said that there hasn't been that consultation with the public. Could you tell me what did happen at the 2-day consultation?
The consultation that took place in November, December was a 2-day event for the design of the building, not to actually ask residents if they wanted the building, if they were prepared to pay more council tax for the building to pay the loan back. So it wasn't an actual meaningfully engaged consultation as to whether the residents wanted the building. It was just to show them the design that's planned and how pretty it is.
Was this meeting you refer to, is this a invite-only meeting, or was it a public meeting where anybody could turn up to?
The public meeting that was arranged a few weeks ago was for the parish of Streatham, for any resident to attend, should they wish, to ask questions and discuss the village centre and other matters that were concerning them. So it was an open public meeting for anyone who wanted to attend.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Anybody else? Claire? Yeah.
Could I just clarify, have you done your own survey of residents?
We conducted a petition to ask residents if they were interested in the proposed community building, and we had over 200 signatures on the petition of people that did not want it. We did provide this petition to the parish council, who filed it away and took no notice of it. We have a recent poll on a social media site this week asking who was in favour of the building. 88% have said no, 10% have said yes, 2% would like more information. Now, this is a social media site with about 200 members on it, of those in the village that have joined. These are people that are for and against the building.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've spent quite a bit of time on this one. Anybody else before we move to Councillor De Lacy from Girton? No. Okay, do we have Councillor? Thank you very much for your time, by the way, and thank you for answering the questions. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for allowing me. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Councillor De Lacy ready? This is now we're moving to Girton.
Yes, Chairman, I'm here.
Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes, and then if you're happy to take questions of clarification from committee members.
Certainly, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Douglas De Lacy. I'm the chair of Girton Parish Council. I've been asked to speak today by the Task and Finish group established by the Parish Council to deliver, to drive, I should say, our pavilion project, and to deliver it indeed. We acknowledge that our project has had problems, from COVID and Brexit to the local elections. We are a very new council, but the project continues, and with your grant, we can complete it. Your recent variation form came at a rather bad time for us. Being unsure of its purpose and without our lead member due to illness, we decided on a minimal response. In particular, we did not fill in the section about requiring further match funding because we already have adequate reserves to meet even the elevated cost of some £770,000. We are undertaking value engineering to see if we can reduce that figure, which reflects the rocketing cost of construction. But our project manager, a company called LXA, has been hard hit by COVID, and it may be a few weeks before we receive its report. However, we do not intend to drop any of our original outcomes. We were surprised at the comment in response to our form that there is no detailed project plan. It is there somewhere in the documentation already submitted to you, and it will be updated as soon as the value engineering report is received. We have refrained from drawing on the grant so far, as we've been able to pay current costs, about £80,000, from our own pocket. So to respond to the concerns expressed to us, we have adequate funding with your grant, we have the plan in place, and are progressing the project with all the original outcomes. With your grant, we are in a position to complete the project and to achieve all of our stated goals. We ask, therefore, for your continued support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor De Lacy. Any questions of clarification at all? Gerton? No, looks like you got away without any questions. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now go back into the main part of this agenda item 5, and Paul will present the report. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. If Paul can find the report, Paul will present the report. The lack of questions. Okay, so this report has a number of recommendations based on the significant number of projects that were reviewed that were deemed red rated and incomplete as agreed by previous committee. I won't review the process anymore, other than to say that a significant weight was put on the returns provided by each of the projects, other documentation, expressions of interest, project monitoring forms were also considered, but the primary response is from the projects based on our fact-finding forms to find out where they were, did bear significant weight, and that may be some of the reasons that a couple of projects that we've just heard feel as though not all of the information has been heard for whatever reason. I'm happy to go through the recommendations one by one, Chair. The first one relates to Fenstanton Community Hub. There, the recommendation is to agree that the Fenstanton amend the project plan, because that amendment be cost neutral for the council, and we believe it can meet the outcomes for which the award was originally given. Project is well supported locally. There is a funding gap, as with most of these projects that have been delayed due to inflation during the delay, but that funding gap has been covered, we believe. A planning application has been submitted, and they have yet to draw down on the County Council Community Capital Fund resource. The project steering group and officers both believe that there was every chance that that project could succeed to completion without any significant risk. Recommendation B relates to the Girton Pavilion grant agreement, and as we've just heard from Councillor De Lacy, the recommendation there was based on termination. The main reason for that termination that the steering group and officers considered we set out in 4.3.2 of the report, and that is that there was a funding gap of £217,000 with no indications, as we saw at the time, how that funding gap could be closed. And indeed, Girton themselves said in their response that to close that funding gap, an alternative for closing that funding gap would be to change the design and so that the original outcomes could be met. And therefore, as a steering committee, we felt that it would fall on one hand or the other. They would either had an unfunded project or a project that wouldn't meet its original outcomes. But there has been an amount of information provided since the publication of the papers. As we've heard, a value engineering process has identified that funding gap, but there is a second round of work on part of that value engineering process, which we'll report soon. That may reduce the funding, but most significantly, Girton have indicated that they can and will meet the funding gap themselves, whether that is to the current funding gap of £217,000 or less than that, should value engineering be able to bring down that cost. If that was the only issue, one might think that recommendation to agree, as I've just mentioned, to Fen Stanton would be consistent. However, that value engineering might suggest alterations to the project, as I mentioned, and therefore I would like to change my recommendation with regards to Girton, that the project be put back to the steering group for reconsideration, based on the fact that there has been information provided since the consideration of the steering group, and to give due consideration to that information will both be fair to the project and fair to the members of this committee, who I don't think should have to try and assess complex new information at very short notice. So had we seen that information, we do believe that there might have been a different outcome. I think that should go back to steering committee, and therefore that's my recommendation, and the date to be confirmed based on an exact date of when the value engineering report is available, so that we have a clear decision date and we can move away from issues in progress and things that might be known in the future. Recommendation C relates to extending the existing God Manchester Football and Sports Association Trust grant. That project was almost complete and had been delayed due to nesting birds delaying road improvements. We expect that project to be complete very soon, and committee and officers universally agreed that that should be extended by date to allow funding. Item D talks to Kimbolton Parish Council. The issue there was, as committee will recall from the previous meeting, about a road crossing. Officers did reluctantly, even understanding the will of committee previously, feel that they had to recommend that no further funding be awarded, because that was within one of the criteria set by steering group, set by this committee, only allowed for that. However, after discussion and taking in the will of the previous discussion at this committee, the recommendation is for Kimbolton Parish Council to submit a new application for additional funding. It says to allow to complete the project in the report. That project is in effect completed, and the reticence of officers related to an indication on the return form that Kimbolton would in fact pay for it themselves if we didn't. However, after discussion, the steering group felt that because some of the delays at least were attributable to the county council itself, we should fund that shortfall. We have to ask for a new application under our grants to external organisations policy. So that's why the recommendation is not just to pay, but to invite a new application. That application, I must stress, is under the old existing Communities Capital Fund. It is not the start of a new process or a new fund, and does not set the criteria in any way for a new fund. Agenda item F is to extend the Wisbeach Park Pavilion agreement as set out per the paper. And agenda item, sorry, I've missed a rather important one, Streatham. I saved the best till last. I thought of little else for days, councillor. So a similar story to Wisbeach, really. The information assessed as we led to the recommendation of termination. There are a number of issues clearly in a very complex and contentious project, but the significant issue for officers and for the steering group was that as yet no match funding had been secured. There is still a gap between the £500,000 that the council have indicated is available and the 1.6 million that Streatham need for phase 1 of this project. I will withdraw, having been the author of the paper, the indication that costs have risen to 3 million. That is disputed by Streatham. It is based on officer recollection, and given that we cannot ascertain exactly that there was a matter of fact, I will withdraw that 3 million issue within the papers. Information also provided since the publication is that the planning application is due for determination. In fact, it is overdue and was due on the 9th of September. Now that a planning application has been submitted, however, a SIL application for funding has been submitted to East Cambridgeshire District Council. And based on the planning permission, of course, the application for the Public Works Loan Board could be made, which wasn't able to be made, hadn't been made when we sought the information. We do have some indications from the NHS, both for the clinical director of the PCN and the estates teams, that a process has begun to support the provision of NHS facilities on that site. We have not had time to get to the bottom of exactly where they are in the process or what level of commitment the local NHS have, but a process has been started and we have had a letter of support from the clinical director of the PCN. So we do need more time on that. The costs for phase 1 at 1.6 million are unaltered since application, and that was something that we thought was significant because every other project that had been delayed had suffered cost increases due to inflation. I was told the inflationary pressures have been met by revision of plans, by removing original intentions of social clubs, caretaker flats, holiday lets and a council office. So there is an argument there that the original application has been amended and we need to look at that in much more detail, I would argue, to understand the impact on what has originally been awarded. In terms of consultation, we've heard a lot about lack of consultation, but there is a statement of community consultation that Streatham Parish Council indicates includes every response in full with no redactions and is available on their website. And in terms of what we've just heard from residents who are concerned about the project, I would caution our interpretation of the 88% vote on a social media site. That social media site exists, and I quote, as a group of residents from Streatham concerned about the lack of support for plans for an expensive village centre. So I'm surprised that's only 88%. I would expect it to be actually greater. That's not for me. That is not me saying that either Streatham Parish Council are right in any matter or the objectors are wrong, but we do need more time to consider these properly. So similarly, as with Girton, I think my recommendation is to refer this back to the steering group for reconsideration of all of these issues so we can assess them properly, in particular community consent and support, and the issue of not cutting off the potential for an NHS facility that our partners may be well along the way of developing. We need to understand that. Again, that might be at a different time to Girton. The key point for reconsideration there, I would believe, would be based on the planning application outcome, the determination of the grant applications, and perhaps also as part of that, we would need to sit down with Streatham and be very, very clear how they would demonstrate genuine community support. Agenda item F, or recommendation F, apologies. Relates to Wisbeach Park. Here the recommendation is to extend the existing grant agreement. They have reconsidered their own proposal post the award, in that it may have been underfunded, but the officers in the committee felt that they consulted with the local community on this, in fact enhanced their plans. While that resulted in additional costs, they sought additional funding without coming back to the council. So our assessment was the outcomes will not only be met but exceeded, and the schedule of construction is June, November 22 with a completion date of March 23. So while that would necessitate a change in the grant agreement, we do think that our support for that should be continued. Recommendation G, Littleport Community Hub. The project is almost complete, and as members will see, there's £338,000 paid out of 406, and the project suffered just time lapse due to COVID, and we believe that should continue. There's no reason to stop that or amend in any way other than amend the contracts to make the dates appropriate. Godmanchester Nursery, recommendation is to extend the existing grant agreement with no amendments, again, other than milestones and completion dates. Extending all of these grant agreements allow us to pay these organisations because the grant agreements are, in most cases, lapsed or lapsing. That's effectively complete, 188 of £190,000 spent and some just groundworks left there. And then the final recommendation, which is subject to recommendation D, if you approve that Kim Bolton should come back with a new application to meet the shortfall of the race table type pedestrian crossing they have actually now installed, rather than then await another round of committee meetings that delegated authority to approve that new application be delegated to myself as the interim deputy director responsible. Sorry, Chair, that was rather long, but
thank you very much, Paul. I have a feeling there'll be a little bit of debate on this. So members have any comments? Ian, first.
Thank you very much, Chair. As the member Kim Bolton, I would just like to update the committee so that you are aware that the tabletop has been constructed, but the actual pedestrian crossing has not at this point, because highways are having difficulties in obtaining the various poles and lights to put up. So it's the tabletop is there, but the rest is not, neither is the white lining. It is all ordered, but they're having difficulties in actually getting that equipment or delivered to the site. So once we get that, then it will be installed. But at the moment, it seems to be on a sort of like a 12-week back order. So, but that seems to have gone out a bit. So it could be a little bit longer than that, but it is progressing. And I thank the committee for hopefully allowing the parish council to put in a new application for that funding.
Thank you, Ian. Lucy.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to say a huge thank you to the steering group and to all the officers for all the time that they've put into going over all these projects, which I know has taken up a lot of work. And I know that work has continued today, so I'm very grateful to all of that. I understand that, mostly I'm very much in favour of sticking with the recommendations that we have before us, and I think we have to have really, really good reasons for not for changing recommendations in the meeting. We had two suggestions today that we should change the recommendations. The first one, I'm going to take them in alphabetical order. So the first one was Girton, where I think we had a really clear reason given, first of all, by Mr. de Lacy and secondly by Paul, about the reasons, the additional information that we had that meant that maybe we would look at that one again. And I'm quite comfortable that on this occasion, it probably would be right to send the Girton application back to the steering group to be reassessed. I would really like to hear then whether we can delegate that decision rather than it having to come back to committee again, or whether you're expecting that after it goes back to the steering group, it has to come back to committee. I'd just like to say that I feel very differently about the Streatham decision after the discussion that we've had and after the information that we've had at this meeting. I think that Mr. de Lacy was really clear about where that money was going to come from and how they were going to fill that gap. And I do not feel that clarity at all about the Streatham application. I think it remains extremely unclear where the money would come from. And it's also very unclear whether there is actually community support for that project. So my instinct is that on that one, we ought to stick with the recommendation that the steering group put before us, because I haven't heard enough today to make me think that things have changed on that application. I know that some of the details of the information has changed, but the fundamental issues there remain. So my suggestion is that we stick with the current recommendation on that one. But Paul, if you could respond on the point around whether we can delegate the decision on Girton to you and the steering group rather than it having to come back to committee, that would be really helpful.
Well, and to some extent, I'll defer to Democratic Services colleagues, but my assumption would be that the committee can decide to delegate any decision, which we have got a previous terms of reference for the steering group, etc. So we just need to be clear that we're got all our ducks in a row, so to speak. But that is something we could do, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, no, that can be delegated down to Paul, to that role, as is requested in one of the other recommendations in the report.
Thank you. Nick, just another Democratic Services question. Would we need to amend the recommendation, or can we stick with the old recommendation, if you see what I mean?
Thank you, Chair. Well, the officer's proposing to alter the recommendation that he's tabling to the committee. So if the committee is willing to accept the alterations, then that's fine. There's no need to vote on that. But that's if you're willing to accept both those alterations that he proposed.
I get the impression we might agree to one, but not the other. Depends how the debate goes. So it's just when we get to that point.
If that's the case, then you'd need to have a vote on whether to accept that alteration.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Steve, and then Philippa.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually would accept all the recommendations as amended. I understand Lucy's concerns about Streatham, but having been part of the steering group and realising why we supported the idea of termination, and seeing that actually the information that was missing now makes me believe actually that project could be delivered. Yes, there's still some uncertainties, but like with Girton, I think if it goes back to the steering group to get confirmation on some of those uncertainties and to see what can be done about ascertaining the community support, I think that that project could still be delivered as advertised, if you will, and the steering group could make sure those boxes were ticked and make sure those details were confirmed, because yes, there are quite a lot of uncertainties, but I think it's moved far enough forward now to say that termination is perhaps a bit premature, shall I say, because I think, you know, the idea of returning to the steering group would be to ascertain the queries that Lucy's mentioned, to make sure that they can be dealt with. So if they can't, then I'm sure the steering group would go back to the idea of termination, but I think there's too many question marks at the moment to take that route. So I would be in favour of supporting all recommendations as amended, Chairman, including the Streatham one.
Thank you very much, Steve. Philippa.
Thank you. I'm happy for the amended version of the Girton recommendation too. Streatham is confusing for the onlooker from the committee. I really appreciate all the work that's gone in both by the steering group and the offices in trying to make sense of this, because it does seem very confusing. Obviously, we didn't have the benefit of a presentation, as the steering group presumably did, setting out the reasons for having this new hub and the demand for it and the unmet need it was going to meet. So presumably there is some, but just if we look at the GP surgery, having in Trumpington made sure that we did have somebody lined up to be GPs 10 years ahead, I think that was. I'm confused as to what is the provision now. A bit of local knowledge is no doubt up the road, up the table from me, because looking at maps, there is a surgery there already. And if they needed to extend it, if there's facilities they haven't got, that may be something that should be drawing down S106 money or just ordinary precepts, if that's how the parish council wanted to help get involved. That was one particular thing that just caught my eye, because there is a surgery there now. We wouldn't be denying of GP surgery, or has it shut since the map was drawn? Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. Dan and then Ian.
Thank you. There is so much to say. I'm the local member for Streatham, so yeah, understandably, I have so much to say, but I'll try and keep it brief. Firstly, to make clear that I support the revised recommendations just put to us by Paul Fox. I don't support the termination of the grant to Streatham Parish Council. Much has been made of the lack of public support. I can tell you on the ground that I attended on purpose, because I knew that there was some contention around this project, the annual parish meeting at Streatham, a packed village hall, couldn't move for people. And I can tell you that there was an enormous amount of support for the project. it cannot be ignored that there are people that are unhappy about this project, but their unhappiness is mainly around one issue, which is position. That issue of position is not the issue upon which this council is suggesting the termination of the grant. The termination of the grant is being suggested on the issue of match funding. We have just heard from Councillor Nuttall that huge efforts have been made now to engage with other funding opportunities, and they need time. They need time to pull that off. I know, I work in that world. I apply for funding every week of my life. There has been no point applying for much funding for the last couple of years, and frankly, the funders haven't been operating anyway. So their hands have been slightly tied, and they have now woken up to that, and they have now put the work in. They have now put those applications in. I am also a member at East Cambridgeshire District Council. I'm on the assessment committees for the funds that have been mentioned, and I know those applications are in. They just simply need the time for those decisions to be made in order to give this project the extra bolster and certainty that it needs. The other thing that we must remember is the basis upon which this application was made. This application was made to fund stage 1. Stage 1 is 1.6 million. It is not an application to fund all stages. It is perfectly usual and normal and acceptable in this kind of world to fund community projects in stages and make each of those stages both independent and interdependent. And that's exactly what Streatham have done very cleverly. Stage 1 will give the village what it absolutely needs, a new community centre. Their community facility is crumbling and old and not acceptable. If the other two phases happen, that will be wonderful. If they don't, they will still have a wonderful new community facility, and every community deserves one of those. There is, in my mind, no question of that. And we should not be depriving Streatham of the opportunity to have a wonderful new community facility, particularly post-COVID. That would be a disgrace. So I think that those points are really important, because it gets down to, you know, the simple bottom line of where this started and where they are now. And yes, we've heard a lot of other things along the way, but actually that they're part of the story, but shouldn't be overemphasized as all of the story. So the other thing is that the land has actually been given. The reason for its position is that the land has been given. That's a gift to the community that's not going to come along every 5 minutes. And why look a gift horse in the mouth? There aren't many other opportunities in Streatham to place a brand new community centre. Therefore, I would be hugely disappointed in this authority if this authority became the reason that Streatham didn't get their new community facility that they so need. And I would urge you all to give them some more time to put the match funding in place, which will satisfy our officers, because that's their worry. The rest of it has been addressed, and the officers are not recommending this termination on the basis of other reasons, because they've been addressed. Remember that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Ian Gardner and then Lorna.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would wholeheartedly agree with what my colleague has just stated, and I totally agree with the interim director's line with regard to the amendment to the recommendations. All I would just like to say is that 100 people turning up to a meeting and voting against the actual application or this community hub is only 6% of the residents of Streatham. So therefore, I do not see how this authority can take that as being the majority view of the residents in Streatham. So I would just like to make that perfectly clear to all members on this committee. So that's why I would support the director's recommendation in this case, or amended recommendation.
Okay, Ian, thank you very much. Lorna?
Thank you, Chair. I think what I'm hearing is a large measure of agreement around the table around all but one of the revised recommendations, and that one is Streatham. I don't propose therefore to talk about any of the other recommendations, because with the amendment, the alteration put forward by the officer regarding Girton, I think there's a clear measure of agreement around the table on all of those. The one that sticks out is Streatham, and I want to talk about that a bit. I think there is still a huge amount of uncertainty. We've seen a project that was originally a single project at 1.6 million, now divided into 3 phases, of which the first phase alone is 1.6 million. The total cost having risen therefore from 1.6 million to 2.25 million. And that's confirmed by the applicant who has spoken to us today. So that's a huge change. It's a very significant cost increase. And we're talking about, as I understand it, just the ability to split that bid down into several phases. So we're not even sure how many of these phases will go ahead. And the GP surgery, which is being offered to residents, the GP facility in this building, is not even in phase 1. So it is not clear that that is definitely proposed to go ahead. We need to bear that in mind, I think. We're not turning down a GP surgery. We are looking at the cost of a project that has escalated significantly, where just one phase of it without the GP surgery is now as expensive as the whole project was to begin with. I don't think I was intending to suggest, and I don't think anyone else was intending to suggest, that a poll on social media was the definitive answer as to what people in Streatham felt about this proposal. But the problem, I think, is that what I've not heard today is any definitive answer about what people in Streatham really think, because there's been a social media poll, a hands up poll at a parish meeting, there's been a petition, there's been a 2-day consultation, which we've heard was only about the design of the building, not about the principle of the building. And I think there is therefore considerable lack of clarity about whether this has the support it needs to go ahead. I've not heard this level of opposition to any of the other applications that have so far received money. And this stands out therefore for that reason alone. I think the recommendation as it stands in the paper, not as altered by the officer in E, is to terminate the grant. My understanding was that that would still give the applicants at Streatham the opportunity to resubmit a bid to the residual money. And if that is something that they could do, then I think, having given due consideration and having some more certainty if there is planning consent given, and I understand there's a special meeting of the planning committee being put forward for the next couple of months, an additional meeting. If there is planning consent, and if there is therefore a more certainty of a PWLB loan, if there is more certainty about what the NHS would like to do with that building, then I think that's something that you know, a revised application could cover. And my understanding was that termination still left open an opportunity to resubmit with more clarity and hopefully more evidence of community support, which I would like to see personally. Therefore, I would prefer, I would be happy to accept the officer's alteration of recommendation B, but not recommendation E.
Lorna, Paul, could you just clarify on the reapplication side?
Thank you, Chair. Just on a point of clarification, and apologies, Councillor, but I think we need to be very clear that we don't set precedents for what will be a new fund. So there will be no resubmission of this. This will fall. What we did say was the steering group noted the grant recipient should not be prevented from reapplying for the forthcoming Cambridgeshire Priorities Capital Fund, should it meet the criteria. However, this will be a competitive process and the project would not receive priority. So apologies for that. I'm just worried about the words resubmission and residual that might imply that they can go again in the same way perhaps Kimbolton has been to this fund. It won't. This was dead and they would be in a pot with everyone else for a fund whose criteria we have yet to determine.
I think I understood that, and I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear in the way I worded what I was suggesting, that this wouldn't mean that they could never come to the council again for funding for this project, but that it would be.
Thank you. I'll come to you later, Dan. I've got Steve and then Ros, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Dupre has misrepresented what's actually been said, inadvertently, I'm sure. She said the project has been divided into three. It's actually been multiplied into three. What was applied for from the Capital Fund was phase one, a community hub, full stop. The rest of the project is additional. So whether the doctor's surgery goes ahead and what need for it and what negotiations are with the NHS is actually immaterial to the community hub part of it, which is what we agreed to fund for £500,000. So to judge it on the basis of what might happen additional in the future is somewhat of a red herring, Chairman. We have had some reassurance that with the Public Works Loan Board and SIL funding, they can meet the 1.6 or 1.7 million pounds required for the community hub element of it, and that's what we're here judging today, Chairman. So I'm still very much with Paul's suggestion going back to the steering group with this, because it is clear we now know they can deliver that first part of the first phase, which is what they applied for. They need to confirm that they've got the planning permission, the SIL funding, and the Public Works Loan Board, and the steering group will hear that information before they make any recommendation back to this committee. But it's disingenuous, Chairman, to say that it's now been divided in three, because the first phase is the first phase, which is what they asked for funding for.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I have Ros, Dan, and then Lucy.
So 100 people attending a meeting may not be a majority of the voting public, but it does show a real passion. There aren't 100 people attending this meeting. This sounds like a wonderful facility, £1.6 million. I'm sure, populations across the county would love this, but it is a lot of money, and it's taxpayers' money that needs to be treated with such respect. And it could refurbish X number of parish council buildings which need renovation across the county, and benefit more communities. I just think we do need to think about how, this is a lot of money, and there seems to be such a mess around it that we also risk reputational damage. Actually this project hasn't met the terms of the original agreement, or is very unlikely to if it doesn't, the time limit is quickly running out. I think if this does come back to the steering group, then it's reasonable to expect that the issue of what the residents of Streatham do or don't want is properly addressed, not in a he said, she said type of manner. I mean, I'm not sure what mechanism that happens by, but it needs to be something that far beyond what's happened today. And there also needs to be a time limit on it, because it just feels that this project is always somewhere in the future. I'm not convinced the Public Works Loan Board funding has been agreed, because that's contingent on the precepts being raised, and it wasn't clear how that mechanism would happen, whether that would go to referendum or not. So I'm not sure it is quite as clear cut as implied.
Thank you. We have Dan, then Lucy, and then Philippa.
Thank you. Just a few things. Councillor Dupre said that she's heard nothing that convinces her about the level of public consultation or support. Yet our officers say in their report that there is a statement of public consultation, and they are happy with that aspect of the project. So let's just keep that clear, please, and in our minds. There are some naysayers. There always are in any big change. But let's just keep clear in our minds that that is not the reason that this project is back before us, and there has been public consultation. And I know, because I was an applicant to this fund and was a successful applicant to this fund, that in order to get success in this fund, clear public consultation had to be shown to the funder. So it wouldn't have got over the line if at that point a significant amount of public consultation hadn't been done. The other thing is, not only was it not quite right, what Councillor Dupre saying that, you know, Streatham could reapply for the money. It's very different applying to a completely new fund than reapplying to the old one. So that's far from correct. But also we have to remember, don't we, that the very applications that we are asking Streatham to make in order to secure their match funding do themselves require match funding. If you pull the carpet under Streatham on the 500,000 that they've got now, then they no longer have any match funding to offer up to the funders that they're now going to match that 500. So actually you're just making their situation worse and much harder. You're taking their match funding away, which then makes it even harder for them to raise money that they need. And then the final point is, you know, if a local authority starts off with a project and it gets bigger and gets phased, then, you know, it's because it's grown in ambition. Why, when a community organisation does the same thing, is it criticised? I don't understand. There is nothing wrong with this project growing in ambition, and it has grown in ambition, and responding to, you know, ever-changing need and community consultation. And just to close, you know, I work in the theatre, and Shakespeare said, "Nothing comes of nothing." And it couldn't be truer of this situation. You can, you know, we might only get phase one if we give them £500,000, but you can be sure if we don't give them £500,000, we won't get phase 1, 2, or 3. And that would be tragic for Streatham, and it would lay at the door of Cambridgeshire County Council. And I would be more than disappointed if you were be prepared to let that happen.
Thank you, Dan. Lucy.
Thank you. I think I've got a few more things to say following on from what Dan's just said than I had to start with. And I think the first thing that I want to say, which I hadn't anticipated saying, but will because of what Dan's just said, is that I think it's incredibly important that we remember that this is public money, and that as long as it's tied up in a Streatham project, it can't go to other projects that other local communities might bring forward. So when you say nothing will come of nothing, actually, as long as this project is tied up in Streatham, that means it is not available to be accessed by other communities around Cambridgeshire. And it's not that other communities don't want new facilities. Actually, many of them do. There are many bids for our money. There are many things that we need to spend it on, and funding at this council is incredibly tight. We are, as a council, facing all of the same financial challenges that households and businesses across the whole country are facing as a result of the cost of living crisis, as a result of really sky-high inflation and pressures on wages. And we do not have money that we can keep sitting around waiting for other projects which may or may not come forward with match funding. So I just wanted to make that clear. Just to come back to what I originally put my hand up to say, I think that it has become clear that while we are happy to take the alteration on the Girton amendment, there is definitely not consensus in the room around the Streatham amendment, and therefore we will need to take a vote on that one. And obviously members will vote according to how the debate has gone and how they feel about it. I think it's important to just be clear about what the process is if the amendment on the, if the alteration to the Streatham one happens. I mean, if that is voted for, I think we agreed with the Girton project that the steering group would have the, we would delegate to the director authority on that one
in order to make the decision that the money would continue to roll forward. I certainly would feel slightly less comfortable about that with the Streatham one, because it feels to me as if there are many, many unanswered questions. And I think that if we do go down the, if when the alteration is voted on, the reference back to the steering group takes place, I would like us to have some more clarity about how long it needs to be before there is clarity around that funding, and about what the delegation on that one is. So I think maybe we need to take the vote first and then see whether that's necessary or not, because actually if the vote is that we don't take the alteration and we do terminate the project, then we don't need to have that discussion. But if it goes the other way, could I request that we then have a discussion about what system will be in place to make sure that we have checks on that one, because there are a huge number of questions still going forward on that project.
Someone's very kindly indicated that perhaps because this is £500,000, this is a key decision, so it would have to come back here anyway. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Steve. Okay. I have Philippa next, then Claire, and then Ian, and then I think we need to bring this to a conclusion and go to a vote. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. I'm very puzzled by what Councillor Schumann said, insofar as, first of all, he was emphasising that the application was for phase 1. And that's what we should have been talking about. Now it's an ambitious project that has naturally grown through community pressure. I'm still back to the bafflement that this should have even got this far without planning permission for phase 1. And I would like, perhaps Paul could just reassure me that whether that was in fact phase 1 that's already got permission, but now it's grown and so they're having to put in another application. Because of course a planning application is a very good way of finding out what public opinion's like on something, especially something in a village where you can put up the map, the plans, you can have a meeting and you get a good feel for what people think about it. And in this case, of course, these are people who will be funding it in the future. So there is a good element of democracy in there. And we certainly owe it both to the Streatham precept payers as well as the county taxpayers to be very, very careful. But I think they will be very, very careful in their reactions to the planning application, because they will be essentially, they'll have skin in the game. So can I just check that there was absolutely no planning permission at all when this was put forward? Thank you.
They put the application in, and I think it's October, from what we were told by Mr. Nuttall, October meeting of the East Cambs Planning Committee.
So what I meant is when they applied for the funding, was there no planning application in at all, or was it just phase 1?
The answer, Councillor Satter, is there was no planning application in at all. That is consistent with a whole range of other projects in the Communities Capital Fund. Streatham is by no means unique in that respect. In fact, a milestone for payment in the Streatham project plan is approval of capital, is approval of planning permission. That may be something the committee wishes to consider when it considers its new fund, but a number of these projects proceeded with indicative funding with no planning permission. And just as a point of information on your planning permission is now in, of course, I believe there are 54 comments against, 22 for in the current on the current ECDC planning site.
Thank you, Claire, and then Ian.
Thank you. There are still so many unanswered questions, I think, with this project. So, and I still feel confused about this phase 1, 2, and 3. Is this a building where phase 1 is a standalone? Is it being built in 3 separate blocks, 3 separate phases? So if phases 2 and 3 don't get built, phase 1 will be a standalone building? Question mark. On the consultation, what was the level of consultation, both for and against? How many people were involved? How was it done? When was it done? In what stages during the project? Over the raising of the money, the much funding, there are still large questions over that. And also, I come back to the comments of other colleagues. the money that's tied up here is not available for other projects. And of course, we have to remember that when these projects were first put forward, they were put forward on a first come, first served basis. So there were many people, many communities that were completely excluded in the first place. So I have really serious concerns over a number of issues concerned with this project.
Thank you, Claire. And, in fact, some of the sum has already been spent. That's right, Paul, isn't it? Some of this has already been used.
There have been 2 tranches of payment to Streatham. The first of £40,000, which was based on the signature of grant agreement, which I'm not sure has happened. And the second of £50,000 based on the approval of planning application, which hasn't happened. The payments have been made though.
Thank you. Ian?
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, following those comments, I would fully agree with Councillor Criswell that the officers go back and get clarity from Streatham and then bring all that information back to this committee prior to we make any decision with regard to termination. I think that is the fair and the right way to go with this, so that we do precisely what the director has stated. We get all the information and then we present that to this committee before a decision is made to terminate, which I think is the right and proper way, especially now that we've heard that this authority has already spent £90,000.
I think Paul's just going to clarify that point.
As a point of clarification, the return from Streatham Parish Council as part of this process indicated of that 90, 40 had been spent. The implication, therefore, is 50 remains unspent, and according to the terms of the grant agreement, could be reclaimed by this authority.
Thank you, Jan, and then Hilary. And then we really need to go to the vote, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, what Mr. Fox has just said about the 40,000 and the 50,000 paid without actually meeting the criteria, I think that's appalling, absolutely appalling by the officers of this authority to pay that out when the criteria were not met. Disgraceful.
I think that was because was it because they met a milestone, Paul, is that correct?
There appears to have been some confusion regarding the milestones. Milestones as a separate project document were tied to particular activities, proper project milestones. And one of those milestones was signing of the grant agreement. The second milestone was attaining a planning permission. Unfortunately, it would appear that in the translation and the drawing up of the grant agreement, those milestones were put into the grant agreement just as time periods. So whereas in one document it had a time and to hit the milestone and what the milestone was, e.g. signing the grant agreement, by the time the grant agreement was drawn up, just the time and the amount had been transferred into the agreement itself, and it appears to have been paid on that basis.
Okay, thank you, Hilary.
Thank you. Just following on from what Ian said, and for clarity, if it goes back, if it goes back to the steering group, it goes back to the steering group with the new information, doesn't it, or updated information, and then those recommendations would come here. That's correct, isn't it? It'd go to the steering group recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for your contributions, and to all the team for their hard work, and also our various speakers. So I think we agreed on everything except recommendation E. I think it's probably fair to say we're not agreed on that one, the Streatham one. So the recommendation as it stands, so not what's in your agenda, Paul has suggested, Paul has recommended that we refer the Streatham Village Centre project back to the steering group for reconsideration. So if we were determined, if this committee decided not to do that, do we have a proposer and a seconder as an amendment to that recommendation? Is that correct, Nick?
No, thanks, Chair. It's just you need to establish whether the committee is happy to accept that alteration. So just a simple vote is enough.
Happy to accept the alteration as suggested by Paul as our officer. Okay, right. So can I ask for those in favour of accepting that recommendation from Paul, that recommendation to alter E in our recommendation? So those in favour.
Of it going.
Just a point of order, there were two alterations. Are we going to take the first one regarding de Girton as read, or are we going?
Oh, I'm
to vote
sorry,
on
you're right.
that?
We
I
should do
think
Girton.
there seemed to be a difference of view between the two. So you might we want to vote on the Girton one?
You can.
First, then
I was.
decide on the Streatham.
I picked up that we were in agreement on Girton, but we'll take a vote just to make sure. That's fine. That's fine. So we'll go to the suggested new recommendation B on Girton, which is to refer that back to the steering group for consideration. Those in favour of Girton? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. Only the next one was straightforward. Recommendation E. So that is the same. That's to refer this, in this case, the Streatham Village Centre project back to the steering group for reconsideration. Those in favour, please show. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. Yeah. Okay, those against.
Thank you, Chair. That's 6 in favour and 6 against.
Lucky me. I will use my casting vote against the recommendation. Thank you. Thank you very much for your contributions, everyone. I know that would be disappointing for some. Yeah.
Chair, does there need to be an additional recommendation regarding the delegation on the Girton project?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Chair, surely a vote on the recommendations as a whole, as altered.
Yes. Can we take the other recommendations on block?
You can take them en bloc or split them up as you wish. But there was a suggestion for a delegation for the Girton project that the I can read out a proposal if you would like. That subject to recommendation B, delegates authority to approve the subsequent recommendation from the steering group on the Gerson Pavilion project to the interim deputy director for communities, employment and skills in consultation with the chair and vice chair of the committee.
Okay, has everybody got that additional recommendation? Yeah. So we were happy with the other recommendations plus that one. I hope this is not confusing people. So all those in favour of the others and the additional one, thank you. That appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution. That's been a pretty exhaustive debate, I think. So well done. We're now going to move, well, in fact, I think, should we just take a 10-minute break?
We only got the agenda plan to do.
Sorry?
Can we not just crack on? We haven't got long to go.
Okay.
Rather than break for 10 minutes.
All right, we'll go on. Yeah, okay, you're right. Actually, there's an agenda plan. So I was just concerned for our democratic services team who've been intense concentration. Well done. Yeah, sorry, we're going to the agenda plan now, which is item 6.
A proposed change to the agenda plan, Chair, with regarding the item on libraries, which we are proposing moves from the November to December committee.
Okay, thank you. Paul, anybody else wish to comment at all? We're all happy with that. Okay, excellent. So our next, we conclude today's meeting. Our next meeting will be on the 1st of November. I'd like to thank everybody for your attendance. Thank you.